He told me later that it was the longest 10 minutes of his life. Not because he was afraid, but because in those 10 minutes, sitting silently in his own office, Keanu Reeves realized something was deeply broken in the company that carried his name. The city stretched out behind him, a glass and steel ocean under a gray morning sky. Keanu sat alone at the long wooden table, the one he had personally chosen because it reminded him of the old kitchen table from his childhood, simple, solid, honest. Around him, leather chairs stood empty. The board meeting that was supposed to start at 9:00 a.m. had already slipped into 9:07. No one had texted, no one had called, no one had even asked if he needed coffee. It was his own office, his own company, his own executive team, and still, somehow, he was the one waiting. He watched his reflection in the glass wall, a man in a dark suit who still felt more comfortable in worn jeans and a leather jacket. The beard a little too grown out, the hair slightly messy. His assistant, Maria, knocked softly and stepped in, her eyes nervous. "They're still in the smaller conference room," she said quietly. "They asked if you could wait a bit." She looked almost ashamed as she spoke, as if she personally had disrespected him. Keanu's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. "It's okay, Maria, thank you." He meant it, but inside something twisted. Through the glass panels he could see the executives in the adjacent room, laughing over cappuccinos, their gestures big and careless as if nothing outside their circle mattered. The CFO checked his expensive watch and smirked at a joke the marketing director made. The COO leaned back in her chair, shoes off, feet up on the glass table. They weren't in a hurry. They weren't worried. They weren't even looking toward the main office. To them, this was normal. To him, it felt like a line finally being crossed. He remembered the early days, when this company was just an idea sketched on napkins and laptop screens at 2 a.m. He had created it with one promise. It would be different from the cold, ego-driven studios that treated people like numbers. Here, kindness would matter. Humility would be strength, not weakness. Every person from janitor to CEO would be treated with respect. He had repeated those words so many times that they felt carved into him. And yet now, watching his executives casually make their own boss wait in silence, he felt like a stranger in his own story. His mind went back to a very different room, years before. A casting office, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a young Keanu sitting on a hard plastic chair. He had waited there for hours while executives laughed behind closed doors. No one apologized. No one even remembered his name. When they finally called him in, they treated him like he should be grateful for the chance to breathe the same air. He had walked out of that building promising himself, if he ever had power, he would never make anyone feel that small. Now, staring at the clock ticking past 9:10, he wondered if, somewhere along the way, he had let people around him become exactly what he had vowed never to be. Maria shifted near the doorway, breaking his thoughts. "Do you want me to call them in now?" she offered. There was a tiny tremor in her voice, not because she feared him, but because she loved this job and didn't want to see the person she admired being disrespected. Keanu looked at her, truly looked at her. The tired eyes, the cheap but carefully ironed blouse, the way she always stayed late but never complained. He suddenly noticed something that hit harder than the waiting. The sadness on her face was too familiar, as if this scene had happened before. "Maria," he asked slowly, "does this happen often, them making people wait like this?" She hesitated. That hesitation told him more than any words could. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I need the truth," she swallowed. "Not to you, sir, but to everyone else. Delivery guys, junior staff, the interns. Sometimes they make people sit for an hour, then cancel. They say it's just business." Keanu's heart clenched. Just business. He had heard those words too many times, used like a shield to justify cruelty. He rose from his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and walked toward the glass wall. His reflection grew larger, overlapping with the blurred shapes of the executives on the other side. He watched the CEO, on paper, his right hand, laugh as he waved his phone in the air, clearly telling some story about a luxury vacation. Every movement, every careless gesture screamed one thing: we're untouchable. Keanu's fingers curled slowly into a fist before he forced them open again. Anger burned in his chest, but beneath it was something deeper and more painful: disappointment in himself for not seeing it sooner. He took a breath, slow and deliberate, the way he did before an intense stunt sequence on set. This wasn't a fight scene, but it felt just as dangerous. One wrong move and years of work could crack apart. Another breath. He felt the weight of every person in the company whose paycheck depended on the decisions made in this room. He thought of the young animator who stayed up all night perfecting a scene, the janitor who whistled softly while cleaning the hallways, the receptionist who knew everyone's birthday by heart. They deserved better leadership than this. They deserved a culture that matched the words printed on the lobby wall: respect, courage, humanity. Without another word, Keanu turned back to Maria. His voice was calm now, too calm. "Can you do something for me?" She nodded quickly. "Of course," he held her gaze. "Go into that room, tell them the meeting has started, and tell them their seats are waiting in here." He pointed to the long table, the one that suddenly felt like a stage for something he could not yet fully see. Maria's eyes widened, reading something in his tone that made her pulse jump. "Right now?" she asked. Keanu nodded once. "Right now?" She disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps echoing softly. Through the glass, he saw the executives glance up, expressions shifting from annoyance to confusion as she spoke. One by one, they rose from their chairs, some rolling their eyes, some smirking, all certain that whatever this was, it couldn't possibly touch their comfort. They walked toward his office with the relaxed swagger of people who believed nothing serious could happen to them here. Keanu moved back to his seat at the head of the table, but this time he didn't sit. He stood behind the chair, fingers resting on the backrest, posture straight, eyes fixed on the door as it began to open. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just about waiting in his own office. It was about deciding, finally, what kind of leader he was willing to be, and what kind of people he would allow to stand beside him. The first executive stepped into the room, grin half-formed, ready with another casual joke, only to freeze when he saw Keanu's face, calm but unreadable, shadowed by something that felt dangerously close to final. One by one, the others followed, their laughter dying in their throats, a strange, heavy silence filling the space between them. Keanu let the silence stretch, heavy and unbroken, until it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then, in a voice soft enough to be almost gentle, he said, "Close the door." And as the latch clicked shut behind them, every person in that room understood, too late, that whatever was about to happen next would change everything. They didn't sit right away. That was the first sign that the balance in the room had shifted. A few of them hovered by their chairs, still trying to read his expression, still hoping this was some kind of awkward joke that would dissolve with a shrug and a laugh. Only the CEO, Daniel, forced a smile and broke the tension. "Keanu, we were just wrapping up the pre-meeting," Daniel said, voice slick with casual confidence. "You know how it is, aligning strategy before we take your time." He emphasized the words "your time" as if he were doing Keanu a favor. A couple of the others chuckled weakly, reaching for that old familiar atmosphere where they were in control, where everything was easy. Keanu didn't answer right away. He let their words hang there, fragile and hollow. Then he walked slowly around the table, not to loom over them, but because he needed to move, to feel the weight of every step. He stopped near the window, the city at his back, and faced them fully. "Take a seat," he said quietly. Chairs scraped against the floor. The executives settled in with varying degrees of discomfort. Some tried to look relaxed. Others avoided his eyes. The COO, Alina, chewed her lip, clearly the first to sense that this was not a regular meeting. In the far corner, Maria had stayed, notebook in hand, unsure if she should leave. Keanu caught her eye and gave a barely perceptible nod, "Stay." She was going to witness everything. He folded his hands in front of him, not as a boss, but as a man trying to hold something fragile together inside himself. "We had a meeting scheduled for 9, he began. "I was here at 8:55. His tone was level, almost conversational. "At 9:10, I was still here, alone." "Yeah, but we were just—" The marketing director, Lewis, jumped in, trying to sound light. "We were in the other room, you know, warming up the conversation, going through the decks. It's normal." "Normal," Keanu repeated softly. The word tasted bitter. "Maria, did anyone tell you they'd be late?" She shook her head. "No, sir." Her voice was barely above a whisper. He looked back at the table. "Did anyone call, text, tell me you needed more time?" Silence answered him, eyes dropped. Phones suddenly seemed fascinating. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to regain the narrative. "Look, there's no need to make this dramatic. We assumed you knew how we run these things. It's just a professional buffer. We prep, then we loop you in. That's how big companies work." That right there was the crack, small but echoing. Keanu let the words sink in. That's how big companies work, he repeated. Is that what we are to you? Just another big company? He glanced toward the wall where, through the glass, the company's mission statement was etched in silver letters. Because that's not what I built. That's not why people trust this place with their time and their souls. Alina exhaled sharply, folding her arms. With respect, Keanu, you're an artist. You care about the heart stuff. We handle the business. Sometimes business is messy. People wait, meetings shift. It's not personal. In my experience, Keanu said, his eyes steady on hers, the moment we say it's not personal is usually the exact moment we've started hurting people. Her gaze wavered. He turned, now addressing all of them. Maria told me something this morning. She said delivery drivers are made to wait in the lobby. Interns sit outside your doors for an hour. Juniors have their one-on-ones canceled after they've spent all weekend preparing. And when she tried to advocate for them, someone told her. He looked directly at Lewis. What did you say to her, Lewis? Color crept up Lewis's neck. I don't remember the exact. It's just business, Maria whispered, surprising even herself. Her hands trembled around the notebook. The room shifted toward her, eyes narrowing. She swallowed, but she didn't take the words back. Keanu nodded slowly. Yeah, it's just business. I heard that a lot when I was younger, usually right before someone treated me or someone I cared about like they didn't matter. He moved closer to the table, leaning on his hands. His voice softened, but the softness cut deeper than anger could. Do you know what it feels like to be 19, sitting in a cramped waiting room, listening to people behind a door laugh about your type before they even see you, to hear them say, if he wants this career, he'll wait? I waited 3 hours that day. They called me in for 5 minutes. No hello, no apology, just, stand there, say this. Next. The room was still. Even the air felt heavier. I promised myself, he continued, that if I ever had power, no one would feel like that around me. That's why this company exists. That's why some of you took these jobs. You told me you believed in that vision. You said you wanted to create something different. He looked from face to face, searching for the people he had once trusted. So when I'm sitting alone in my own office, watching my executives laugh and sip coffee while the clock passes 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you know what I see? Not a scheduling mistake. I see a culture. I see what you think matters, and I see what you think doesn't. Something shifted in Daniel's expression. Annoyance flickered into defensiveness. Hold on, he said, leaning forward. You're reading way too much into a simple delay. We're responsible for billions in value and hundreds of jobs. We don't have the luxury of treating every minute like a therapy session about feelings. Keanu straightened, the hurt in his eyes cooling into something steadier, harder. You think respecting people is a luxury? No, Daniel shot back. But obsessing over how long someone waited, yeah, that's a little emotional for the CEO of a major studio. There it was, the quiet insult dressed up as advice. Emotional, soft, not built for real business. The same old story he'd been hearing his whole life. Before Keanu could respond, the door opened slightly and a head peeked in. It was Omar, one of the youngest storyboard artists. His eyes widened as he saw the full executive team. Sorry, I didn't know you were all in here. I'll come back. It's okay, Omar, Keanu said, glancing at him. What do you need? Omar hesitated, then stepped inside a little. I was just dropping off concept frames for the shelter project. I was told the greenlight meeting was today at 9. I've been waiting outside for 30 minutes, but then they said it was postponed indefinitely. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. I just wanted to know if I should keep working on it or drop it. Keanu felt something twist inside. He looked at the packet of drawings in Omar's hands, edges worn from being held and reworked. Hope crumpled but still alive. Who postponed it? He asked calmly. An uncomfortable rustle swept the table. No one answered. Omar glanced at the floor. It was on the schedule. I guess it wasn't important enough. He started to back away. Sorry for interrupting. Wait, Keanu said gently. Come here. Omar swallowed and stepped forward, every move careful like he was walking into a spotlight he hadn't asked for. Keanu took the packet from his hands and flipped through the pages. The drawings were raw but powerful, Families in a storm, strangers holding doors open for each other, small gestures of courage in a broken city, love in the middle of chaos, humanity in the middle of profit charts. "These are good," Keanu said, his voice low. "Really good." He turned a page to a panel of a young woman giving her only umbrella to an old man curled on a bench. Rain poured down around them, but in the drawing the moment felt warm. "Why did you want to tell this story?" Omar looked up, surprised that anyone was asking. Because when I first moved here, I slept in my car for 2 weeks. No one knew. One night, this stranger knocked on my window and gave me half a pizza and a blanket. I never saw him again. But I promised myself, if I ever could tell stories, I'd tell ones that make people want to be that guy. You could feel the room fracture a little. The executives shifted, uncomfortable. They weren't used to these conversations happening with the door open, with witnesses younger than they were. Keanu closed the packet carefully like it was something fragile. He set it on the table right in front of Daniel. "This is the kind of story I built this place to make," he said. "This is why we exist, and you postponed it, indefinitely, without talking to me, without even giving him 5 minutes. Why?" Daniel exhaled sharply, patience fraying. "Because it doesn't sell," he said. "It's small, it's emotional, it's charity, not business. We're aiming for global franchises, not rainy-day kindness pieces. We cut it before the investors even had to see it. That's our job, protecting you from wasting time on things that won't scale." The words hit harder than intended. Protecting you, wasting time, things that won't scale, he might as well have said, protecting you from being who you are. Keanu looked at Omar, whose shoulders had started to fold inward, hope shrinking. Something in Keanu rebelled violently against that sight. "Omar," he said, his voice steady, "go back to your desk, keep working on shelter. Don't drop it, not for anyone." Omar nodded slowly, as if he'd just been pulled back from a cliff and slipped out of the room. The door clicked shut again, leaving the executives alone with the weight of what had just happened. Daniel rubbed his temple. "You can't undermine us like that in front of staff," he said. "It destroys the chain of command." "Maybe the chain is the problem," Keanu replied. "You're letting your feelings run the company," Daniel pushed. "We're here to make sure that doesn't happen. That's why you hired us, to be the spine, not the heart." For a moment, Keanu said nothing. His mind flashed through every decision he'd trusted them with, every compromise he'd allowed in the name of growth, every time he'd swallowed his discomfort, because this is how big studios do it. He told himself he was fighting from the inside. But now, looking around the table, he wondered if slowly, quietly, they had been changing him instead. He walked back to his chair and finally sat down, but not in defeat. It felt more like stepping into a role he'd been avoiding. His eyes were calm, but there was a new clarity in them, a resolve that hadn't been there when the meeting started. "You're right about one thing," he said slowly. "I did hire you. I trusted you. I let you run the numbers and the deals and the schedules because I believed we wanted the same thing." He paused, letting the next words form with painful honesty. "But if protecting me means protecting me from kindness, from the stories that matter, from the people who make them, then maybe we're not on the same side anymore." A chill moved through the room. Elena leaned forward, worry finally cracking through her cool exterior. "Keanu, be careful. We've taken this company from a passion project to a global brand. You can't just throw that away because an intern waited outside a door and a meeting started 10 minutes late." His gaze met hers, unwavering. "You think what I'm about to do is about 10 minutes?" Her eyes searched his face. "Isn't it?" The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. "No," he said softly. "It's about every minute, every person, every time we chose comfort over courage and called it strategy." He looked at each of them in turn, slower now, like he was seeing them clearly for the first time. The CFO who quietly cut staff training budgets while approving luxury retreats. The marketing director who loved the word story, but mostly meant spin. The COO who believed fear was more effective than respect. He took a breath. "Before we talk about numbers," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, if not for me, then for yourselves." He let a long silence fall. "When was the last time any of you did something kind that didn't benefit you at all?" No one spoke. The question hung in the air like smoke, curling into every corner of the room, forcing them to look somewhere they'd avoided for a long time, inward. And as the silence stretched, and none of them could find an answer they were proud to say out loud, Keanu realized with a sudden, painful clarity that this moment was no longer about hurt feelings or late meetings. It was about whether he was willing to keep his company's soul chained to people who had forgotten they had won. He leaned back slowly, fingers tapping once on the table, as if marking the beat of an invisible countdown. "All right," he said quietly, "then we need to talk about what happens next." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his fists on the table. That somehow made what came next feel even more dangerous. Keanu just sat there for a second, elbows resting lightly on the wood, as if he was weighing not a decision, but a whole future. "What happens next?" Daniel repeated, forcing out a tight laugh. "We get back on track. We walk you through the quarterly numbers, the investor roadmap, the franchise slate. We all have busy days, so—" "No," Keanu cut in, calm but final. "What happens next is we stop pretending this is normal." A flicker of panic crossed Daniel's eyes before he smothered it with irritation. "You're overreacting." "Maybe," Keanu said, "or maybe I've been underreacting for too long." He looked at Maria. "Can you bring in the printouts I left on your desk?" She nodded quickly and slipped out. The door closed softly behind her, leaving the executives alone with him for a moment. The CFO, Victor, spoke for the first time. "Is this about the bonus pool?" he asked, voice cold and dry. "Because, frankly, if we're going to dive into emotional accounting, then we should also acknowledge the revenue we've generated." Keanu studied him. "Emotional accounting," he repeated. "That's an interesting phrase. Tell me, Victor, where in your spreadsheets do you track burnout or trust, or how many people go home feeling like they don't matter?" Victor shifted in his seat. "Those aren't measurable variables." "They are," Keanu said softly. "You just don't want to measure them because then you'd have to admit what they cost." The door opened again. Maria entered with a thick folder, her steps careful. She placed it in front of Keanu and moved to the side, close enough to see, far enough to disappear if she needed to. Her eyes kept flicking toward the executives, but when they met Keanu's, there was a small, fierce kind of hope there. "Thank you," he told her, and the sincerity in his tone made her cheeks flush. He opened the folder and started spreading papers across the table. Emails, reports, HR logs, anonymous feedback forms. The executives watched, some pretending not to be curious, others leaning forward despite themselves. "These," Keanu said, tapping the stacks, "are messages the people in this company have been trying to send me for the last year. Some got filtered, some got handled. Some never made it to my desk at all." He glanced up. "Funny thing is, the more successful we became, the fewer of these I actually saw, so I asked Maria to dig, and she did." Lewis let out a low, disbelieving sound. "You went around us." "I went to the people we're supposed to serve," Keanu corrected. "You just happened to be in the way." He picked up one page and began to read, his voice steady without theatrics. "I love working here. I grew up watching our films. But lately it feels like we're not the studio from the posters on the wall. Meetings are canceled with no explanation. New ideas are shut down if they don't fit a formula. Some executives talk about kindness on stage, then yell at assistants off stage. I don't want to leave, but I'm starting to feel like I don't belong in the place that inspired me to dream in the first place." He set that sheet down and grabbed another. "I'm a night janitor. No one here knows my name. That's okay, I get it, but last week one of the big bosses dropped a coffee on the floor in front of me, looked at me, and walked away without a word. I cleaned it, of course, that's my job. But it stayed with me, not the coffee, the look, like I wasn't a person, just a mop." He put it down, picked up another. "There's a young artist here who worked 3 months on a pitch. He was so excited. The executives didn't even come to the meeting. They sent an email 2 hours later. We're going in a different direction." He pretended he was fine, but I watched him delete every file from his computer. He said, "It's stupid. I shouldn't have tried." I think we lost something important that day, not his idea, him. The room was utterly still now. No one looked at each other. They watched the pages as if the ink might rearrange itself into something less uncomfortable. Keanu let out a slow breath. You know what all these have in common? None of them mention profits or stock price or market share. They talk about something else. Something I used to think was the whole point. Alina's eyes were shiny now, though she tried to hide it. We didn't know it was this bad, she said. People complain, that's what employees do, if we reacted to Every what? Keanu asked, gentle but sharp. Every time we hurt them. It's not personal, Victor insisted, doubling down. Tough environments build strong people. We all went through it. We survived. Keanu looked at him with a kind of quiet sadness. You know what I've learned doing stunt work? Pain doesn't always make you stronger. Sometimes it just makes you numb. And numb people can hurt others without even feeling it. That's not strength. That's damage. For a moment he seemed far away, somewhere back in his own past. Then he focused again, gaze clearer than ever. I have made mistakes, he said. I have hurt people. I have failed to show up. I'm not standing here pretending to be some perfect, gentle saint. But there's a difference between failing and feeling it and failing and calling it strategy. A tense silence followed. Somewhere in the building, faintly, you could hear the distant sounds of laughter and typing and printers. Life going on, unaware that a fault line in the company was starting to open. Daniel straightened, shoulders squaring as he slid into the one role he trusted most, the negotiator. Look, he said, voice measured, no culture is perfect. We've scaled fast, things slip. That's why we exist, to manage that chaos. If there's a perception problem, we can fix it. New HR workshops, a kindness campaign. We'll even put you front and center, talk about empathy, resilience, whatever you want. But don't mistake isolated complaints for a broken system. The system works. Look at our numbers. He tapped his tablet, pulling up a chart. Revenue lines soared, global reach expanded. The image was seductive, progress wrapped in clean, rising lines. See, he said, you may not love every decision, but the results speak for themselves. We're winning. That's what you brought us here to do. We're winning, Keanu repeated, eyes still on the chart. At what? Daniel blinked. At business. Are we winning? Keanu asked quietly. At being the kind of company we said we would be? Are we winning at making stories that remind people to be better, kinder, braver? Or are we just bigger? No one answered. I walk onto sets, he continued, and I see crew members wearing our logo like it's a shield. They believe this place stands for something, not perfection, but something good, something human. He looked up. If we let that quietly die, then what are we? Just another machine that turns people into content and feelings into leverage. Lewis shifted, his usual charm stripped down to something more raw. What do you want from us then? He asked. Tell us, rules, metrics, a checklist for kindness. We can't run a global company on vibes and good intentions. I don't want a checklist, Keanu said. I want alignment. I want leaders whose first instinct when they see someone waiting in a hallway isn't, they can wait. But they gave us their time. We owe them ours. I want people who understand that kindness isn't a PR strategy, it's a daily practice. That courage isn't just about taking financial risks. It's about standing up when something feels wrong, even if it's profitable. He looked at each of them again, slower this time, like he was memorizing their faces. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to care. And when I look at how you move through this building, how you talk about our people, how you delayed me this morning while joking next door, I don't see care. I see convenience. For the first time, real fear broke through Daniel's composure. Where is this going? He asked, voice low. Keanu leaned back, gaze steady. When he spoke again, his words were careful, as if he knew they would not be easy to take back. It's going, he said, to the simple truth that I don't trust you to guard the heart of this place anymore. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victor's jaw tightened. You can be disappointed, you can be angry, you can even fire one of us if that makes you feel better, but you can't just tear out the whole leadership spine overnight. This isn't one of your movies. There are contracts, boards, shareholders. If you try to blow this up, it's not just us who'll feel it. Hundreds of jobs could be at risk. Are you really prepared to burn it all down for a moral statement? The question landed heavy. For a beat, doubt flickered across Keanu's face, real human doubt. He saw what they were trying to make him see, the collateral damage, the headlines, the chaos. Fear whispered, maybe this is too much. Maybe you should just settle, fix what you can, compromise again. He thought of the young version of himself, hungry and hopeful in that fluorescent casting room, being told to wait, to be grateful, to accept whatever treatment came his way because that's just the industry. He thought of how long it had taken him to realize that survival built on silence comes with a hidden bill: your voice. Maria shifted her weight, clutching her notebook like a lifeline. For a moment her eyes met his and he saw it, the question she didn't dare speak out loud. Are you really going to let them keep doing this? To us? To them? To you? He exhaled, slow and steady, like a diver breaking the surface after being underwater for too long. You're right, he said to Victor. This isn't one of my movies. There are no stunt doubles. If I make the wrong call, real people get hurt. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a quiet, unwavering conviction. That's exactly why I can't keep pretending it's okay. He turned to Maria. Can you call legal, ask them to stand by on line 2, and notify the board I'll be requesting an emergency session this afternoon? Her eyes widened. Right now. Yes, he said, right now. She moved to the phone with trembling hands, understanding more than anyone else what this meant. The executives watched, stunned, as the person they thought was easiest to manage started to rearrange the rules of the game in front of them. Daniel leaned in, his charm gone, replaced by a controlled, dangerous calm. Think very carefully, Keanu, he said. We didn't just build this company for you. We built it around you, your likeness, your name. You scorched the earth here and it follows you. You'll be the actor who couldn't handle the realities of business. The one who fired an entire executive team because his feelings got hurt over a coffee break. Keanu's eyes met his evenly. If the story people tell about me is that I cared too much about how we treat others, he said, I can live with that. What I can't live with is walking down these halls knowing I chose comfort over courage when it mattered. Victor scoffed. Courage, this is ego. Ego, the word hung there, then softened as he turned it over. You think this is about my pride being hurt because I had to wait? He shook his head, a small, almost weary smile touching his lips. I've waited my whole life, on sets, in audition rooms, in hospitals, on sidewalks. Waiting isn't new to me. What's new is realizing that somewhere along the way, I allowed this place to become the very thing we were supposed to challenge. He stood again, but this time the movement was slow, deliberate, like the beginning of a scene he knew he had to nail in one take. You said you built this company around me, he continued. That might be the problem. It was never supposed to be about me. It was supposed to be about the people we could reach with our stories and the people who trusted us with their talent and time to create them. You call them resources. I call them family I haven't met yet. The word family hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. From the corner of the room, a faint buzzing interrupted the tension. The desk phone lit up. Maria checked the display, then looked at Keanu. Legal is on line 2, she said quietly. They're asking if you still want them to join. He looked at the executives. Fear, anger, disbelief, calculation, they all flashed across their faces. It would be so easy to back down now. To say, not yet, to buy time, to find a softer path. Instead, he nodded. Yes, put them on speaker. As the line clicked, and the polite voice of the company's head counsel filled the room, a strange stillness settled over everyone, a sense that some invisible point of no return had just been crossed. This is Daniel from Legal. How can I help? Came the voice through the speaker. Keanu held the gaze of the people around the table, feeling his pulse slow, not from calm exactly, but from clarity. Hi, Daniel, he said into the phone, his voice steady. This is Keanu. I need you to walk me through the procedure for terminating employment contracts for members of the executive leadership team. The words landed like a shockwave. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. Alina's breath hitched. Louis stared, unblinking. Victor's knuckles whitened as his hand clenched the arm of his chair. And for the first time since the meeting began, genuine panic cracked through Daniel's polished mask. Wait, the CEO snapped, half to the phone, half to Keanu. You can't be serious. You're talking about firing your entire executive team. Do you have any idea what kind of war you're starting? Keanu looked at him, not with rage, but with a strange, almost gentle sadness. I didn't start this war, he said quietly. I'm just finally choosing which side I'm on. The legal counsel's voice came again, a bit more cautious now. Mr. Reeves, are you requesting this hypothetically, or is this an active directive? The room held its breath. Keanu's next words came out soft but unmistakable, carrying the weight of a man who understood that kindness without courage is just a nice idea, and courage without kindness is just another form of power. It's an active directive, he said, and we're going to do it by the book, respectfully, legally, humanely, but we're going to do it. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of fear, of disbelief, of a sudden electric sense that everything was about to change. And as the lawyer on the other end of the line began to explain the steps, and the executives realized this was not a bluff, a new tension rose in the room, one that had nothing to do with money or contracts. Because beneath all the panic and anger, a question was forming in the back of every mind. What kind of man is willing to risk everything he's built, just to keep his soul and his company's soul intact? And what, exactly, was he going to do with all that power once they were gone? He expected shouting, threats, maybe even someone storming out. Instead, there was this strange, brittle quiet, like the air right before a glass finally shatters. On the speaker, the lawyer's voice stayed professional. In a case like this, Mr. Reeves, we'll need to review each contract individually, notify the board, and ensure severance and transition plans are in place. It will be significant. Do it right, Keanu said. No shortcuts, no cruelty. They've put years into this place, even if we disagree now. I won't repay their mistakes with more of the same. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He was preparing to fire them and still talking about treating them with respect. That, more than anything, separated him from the way they would have handled anyone under them. Understood, the lawyer replied. I'll start drafting documentation and send you a confidential packet within the hour. Thank you, Keanu said. And Daniel, one more thing, whatever we do, we protect our employees. No delayed salaries, no surprise layoffs in lower ranks to balance the books. If there's any cost to this, it lands on my side of the table, not theirs. On the other end, the lawyer hesitated, then answered more softly. I'll make that clear, sir. They ended the call, the speaker went silent, but the room was anything but. Victor leaned forward, anger finally shaking through his polished composure. You realize what you've just done? You want to talk about kindness, fine. But there's nothing kind about ripping out the leadership of a studio this size in one day. When investors panic, they pull money, projects die, people get cut. You won't be able to control all the consequences. You're risking everything. Keanu listened, his expression steady. You're right, he said. I can't control everything that happens next. That's the part that scares me. He let that sit there, honest, vulnerable. But I can control one thing, what I choose to stand for when it's hardest. And if we lose money because we chose humanity over convenience, then that's a loss I can live with. Lewis shook his head, half in disbelief, half in dark amusement. You'll be crucified for this. They'll call you unstable, emotional, naive. You think the internet cares about your values? They care about drama. They'll turn this into a circus. Maybe, Keanu said. But somewhere, some intern, some janitor, some kid with a storyboard in his backpack is going to see that the guy whose name is on the door finally chose them over people who treated them like background noise. And that matters more to me than a perfect headline. Elena stared at the table, breathing unsteady. You don't have to do it this way, she said, her voice quieter, stripped of corporate armor. We can change. We can fix this. Fire me if you want someone to blame, but the whole team. Do you know how many nights we stayed up protecting this place from sharks you never even saw? We fought for you too. Maybe not always the right way, but we did. Her words weren't a performance now. They came from a tired, complicated place somewhere between guilt and love and fear. And they hit him. He looked at her for a long moment. I know you fought, he said gently. I know you all did. I'm not erasing that. I'm not saying you're villains. I'm saying somewhere along the way we stopped fighting for the same thing. He paused, feeling the weight of the truth. You started fighting for control. I started fighting not to lose myself. Those battles don't line up. Her eyes glistened, So that's it, years of work just over. No, he said, not over, just different. He drew a breath, steadying his voice. This isn't a public execution, it's a turning point. You'll get generous severance, full credit for the growth you brought. I won't trash you in the press. I won't leak our worst moments. You'll land somewhere else and you'll be brilliant there. But here I have to start again, smaller, slower, maybe weaker on paper, but stronger where it counts. Victor let out a harsh laugh. Where it counts, you talk like you're in some indie film about a noble underdog. This is the real world. Keanu tilted his head. The real world, he echoed. The one where people go home crying because they were humiliated in a room like this. The one where a janitor is invisible until he makes a mistake. The one where a young artist deletes his work because it doesn't scale. His voice didn't rise, it just sharpened. That's your real world. I'm not naive, Victor, I just refuse to worship it. For a beat, none of them knew what to say. Maria cleared her throat softly, surprising herself as every eye turned to her. May I say something? She asked. Keanu nodded, please. She looked nervous, but there was a quiet courage in her posture now, the kind that's born when someone realizes the person they admire is actually willing to fight. I've worked here since the early days, she said. I've seen this company when it was just a few people eating cold pizza at midnight, arguing about whether a single line in a script felt honest. And I've seen it now with private chefs and black cars and people who make assistants cry and then post quotes about kindness on social media. She swallowed. Maybe both versions care about success, but only one cared about us. Her words were simple, but they landed like a verdict. I don't hate any of you, she added quickly, glancing at the executives. You're smart, you work hard, but somewhere it stopped being about the stories. It became about the numbers about the stories, and those are not the same thing. The room went quiet again. This time, the executives really listened, if only because they'd never heard their assistant speak with that much clarity before. Keanu gave her a small nod of gratitude. Thank you, Maria. Daniel rubbed his face like he was trying to wake himself from a bad dream. You think you can just replace us with? What? Nice people. Kindness doesn't read contracts. It doesn't negotiate distribution deals or outmaneuver hostile investors. You're walking into a war zone without armor. Kindness is not the opposite of strength, Keanu said. It's the way strength is used. I'll bring in people who know the battlefields. But this time, I'll choose them for how they treat the weakest person in the room, not how loudly they talk in the boardroom. He walked to the window, looking out for a moment at the city below. Its chaos, its beauty, its contradictions. When he spoke again, his voice carried the tone of someone narrating a promise to themselves. We'll make fewer projects, he said, but each one will mean something. We'll still aim big, but not at the cost of the souls making the work. We'll take chances on stories like Shelter. We might fail. We might lose money some years, but we'll sleep at night knowing we didn't turn people into collateral for our ambition. Slowly, he turned back to them. I called you in today thinking this would be another meeting, he admitted. Maybe a hard conversation, maybe a warning. I didn't plan to do this. His eyes darkened with the memory. But when I sat alone in my own office, watching you laugh in the next room while people like Omar and our janitor waited outside your doors, something broke. Not just in how I see you, in how I see myself for letting it get this far. He paused, searching for the least cruel way to finish. There wasn't one, so he chose the honest one. So yes, he said softly, I'm firing you, all of you, not because you're monsters, but because the version of this company that lives in your heads is killing the version that lives in my heart. And if I let that continue just to avoid chaos, then I'm the one betraying what we built. Elena looked like she might say something, an apology, a plea, a curse. But the words never came. Instead, she nodded once, almost imperceptibly, as if some buried part of her respected the brutal integrity of his choice, even while it hurt. What happens now? Lewis asked hoarsely. Now, Keanu said, we do this properly. HR will meet with each of you privately. We'll sign what needs signing, honor what needs honoring. You'll get time to transition your responsibilities. No ambushes, no public humiliation. I meant what I said about kindness. It doesn't end where contracts do. The irony of him being more gentle in their exit than they had often been with others didn't go unnoticed. And after that, Victor pressed. After that, Keanu drew a breath. After that, I walk down to the floor. I'll tell everyone what's happening myself. No email blast, no spin. I'll tell them why. I'll tell them I'm scared too, that we're not invincible, that some projects might be delayed or lost. But I'll also tell them this. From today forward, no one waits in the hallway wondering if they matter to the people in this room, because this room is going to change. Permanently. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Daniel stood, smoothing his suit, his movements slower than usual. Not defeated exactly, but weighed down by something heavier than numbers, consequence. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Maybe not today, but one day when a deal falls apart or a competitor eats your lunch, you'll remember this moment, and you'll wish you kept people like us around." Keanu looked at him, the man who had been his right hand, who had both protected and reshaped this company in ways he was only now fully grasping. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe, when some kid watches a film we make 10 years from now and decides to be kinder to a stranger instead of cruel, I'll remember this moment and be grateful I chose them over us." Daniel stared at him a second longer, then picked up his tablet. "I hope, for their sake, you're right," he muttered and walked to the door. One by one, the executives rose, some angry, some shell-shocked, some quieter than they'd ever been in that room. None of them slammed the door. The soft clicks as they left felt stranger than shouting would have, more final. Soon only Keanu and Maria remained. For the first time since the day began, the room felt spacious. Not triumphant, not yet, just open like a wound that had finally been cut clean instead of left to rot. He let out a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind something raw and human, doubt, fear, a lonely kind of relief. "Did I just ruin everything?" he asked quietly, half to himself. Maria looked at him, seeing not the movie star or the CEO, but the man who had just bet his reputation, his company, and his comfort on a belief that people still mattered more than power. "Maybe," she said honestly. "For a while, it's going to be messy, scary. A lot of people won't understand." She took a breath. "But for what it's worth, I've never been prouder to work here than I am right now." He stared at the empty chairs, the power that had just walked out, and then at the door Omar had passed through earlier, clutching his drawings like a lifeline. Somewhere down there, artists were working, assistants were answering phones, janitors were cleaning coffee stains no one apologized for. "Call Omar," Keanu said suddenly. "Now," Maria asked. "Yeah, tell him to gather whoever's free. Animators, writers, anyone. We're going to have a meeting in the open space," he said. "No suits, no glass walls. I want to hear their ideas, all the weird, small, unscalable ones." A tired, real smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Let's start rebuilding this place from the story department up." Maria nodded, emotion thick in her throat. "Okay." She started to leave, then turned back. "You know, when I started here, I used to tell my parents I worked at the nicest studio in the world. Then, for a while, I stopped saying that. I'm excited to tell them again." He met her eyes, and for a moment the fear receded. "Me too," he said. When she left, he was alone again. Same office, same table, same view of the city, but nothing was the same. He moved to the glass wall and looked out, not at the skyline this time, but at the reflection staring back at him. A man in a suit who still felt like a kid on a plastic chair, waiting outside some door, hoping someone would see him as more than a number. "Power doesn't change you," he murmured to himself. "It shows you who you've been all along and asks if you're willing to live with it." He thought of all the people who would watch this moment from a distance, on social media, in headlines, in whispered industry gossip. Some would mock him, some would admire him, most would move on to the next story. But somewhere, he knew, a few would really see what had just happened. A man had chosen to fire the part of his success that demanded he sacrifice his humanity. He had chosen heart over armor, kindness with teeth, courage that didn't look like domination but like protection. He turned away from the glass and opened the door. Outside, the office buzzed with normal life, unaware. Maria was already walking quickly toward a group of artists. Omar was there, clutching his folder, eyes wide and confused. When he spotted Keanu, he straightened, instinctively bracing himself, as if waiting to be told his project was officially dead. Instead, Keanu smiled and nodded at him. "Let's talk about shelter," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I think the world could use a story like that right now." Heads turned, whispers started. Something rippled through the floor, not panic, not yet, but a shift, a sense that the rules might be changing. "Really?" Omar asked, voice trembling. "Really?" Keanu said. "And after that, I want to hear everyone's bad ideas, the ones that are too small, too strange, too emotional, the ones that won't scale." He looked around at the growing crowd. "Because that's why we're here, not just to win, but to matter." Eyes met, shoulders lifted. People who had walked these halls for years feeling invisible suddenly looked, seen. Back in the boardroom, the chairs sat empty, still warm from the weight they had held that morning. The executive laptops lay closed, screens black, graphs and charts tucked away for now. In another room, contracts were being drafted, endings put to paper. Painful, complicated, necessary. But in the open workspace, surrounded by nervous artists and assistants and technicians, something else was beginning. A different kind of leadership, raw and unpolished, willing to fail honestly rather than succeed coldly. He didn't know if the company would thrive or struggle. He didn't know if the industry would reward this choice or punish it. He didn't know if, years from now, he'd look back on this day with gratitude or regret. What he did know, with the quiet certainty of a man who'd been both powerless and powerful, was this. He would never again sit in his own office and watch people he trusted laugh while others waited outside the door, wondering if they mattered. Not in his company, not in his story, not in his name. And as he sat down among his people, not above them, not apart from them, and opened Omar's first sketch on the table for everyone to see, the real work began. Building something strong enough to succeed, and kind enough to deserve it.